Hey, cool. So, all right, we've started off this stream in epic fashion with a mute. My hair looks good though, so I guess everything's good. Somebody says in the chat, yeah. Hi. I'm actually overly prepared, as you saw. We've got lots of windows and things up here, and yeah, no, I was just muted. So, welcome to the show. This is a monumental day here. We're here to take stock of things. Of course, we already did a stream on the recent blog update from George R. R. Martin. Yes, George R. R. Martin is backing up, folks. He's backing up. He's backing off of his promises. And we're here to talk about. Well, let me tell you what we're here to do. We're here to talk about why George is stuck. We're going to go through some of the emotional barriers. We're going to do some psychoanalysis of George. I hate to say it, but we are. We're going to go through all the plot lines, and we're going to take stock of how many chapters approximately George needs to advance certain plot lines to certain places. We're going to assess some of the different, plot lines or scenes that he might be having a truck. That's the dump truck full of money backing up to George's house. Yeah. So, so look, yeah. Normally, I have a very strict policy of only being positive and polite, specifically about George. It's well known that people, always finish when's George going to finish Winds of Winter? Well, it's been 11 years, and we are here to talk about it. So, my normal policy is a little bit looser. If you want to bitch, it's okay. We are here for catharsis and support. I would just ask a couple of things. Let's not have any talk of George dying. Be respectful, okay? If you want to criticize him, that's fine, but let's not have any talk about him dying. And second, just common sense. We don't need a ton of swear words and stuff, but I am creating the space for catharsis and stuff. So if you want to take your you know respectful little shots at George or whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's what we're here to talk about. But look, like I said, what I'm interested in, it's I call this top 10 reasons why George is stuck. We could list the 10 reasons of Fire and Blood 2, House of the Dragon, Dunk and Egg Part 4 and 5, the other HBO shows, Wild Cards, all the other projects that George is doing, right? This is the easy answer. Lots of people, want to, oh, well, he's too distracted. Here's the thing, guys. He is distracting himself from writing Winds with all this other stuff. Why is he doing that? He's doing that because he's stuck on Winds. I continue to believe that if George had the Winds of Winter plot, he would have the book out. Remember, originally, George was talking about finishing the series before the HBO series was done. And he was complaining that they only went 8 seasons. Oh, they could have gone 10 seasons. Well, we're already past the time now when it would have been 10 seasons. And not only has he not finished Winds and Dream of Spring, he hasn't even released Winds. Okay? He wanted to finish Winds years and years and years ago. So before he started all these side projects, he was already struggling with Winds. And he has continued to struggle. Then we had COVID. We've had 2 years of COVID. George hasn't really been able to go anywhere, and he still has not finished Winds. So very clearly, although the distractions are a thing, you can see right up here, I've got, right up top, list of things that it's not. It's not the other projects. The other projects are something that George is distracting himself with because he's having a problem. I think that's very obvious. It's also not symbolism. The symbolism helps him write the story. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And it's not coming up with an ending because he has the ending. He said he knows where he's going approximately with the major plots. Yeah, 2 years since the show ended. Yeah, I think that's right. Is it 3 or is it 2? My life's been kind of weird since then. Actually, no, it's 2 years of COVID, 3 years since the show ended. The show ended last April, if you recall. It was April or May. So yes, Jennifer, he does have too many threads open. George does struggle with pacing. And we're going to talk about all of that. Like you can see up here, the things he struggled with before. We're going to go through that. So that's what this stream is here for. We're going to talk about the emotional hurdles that George has. We're going to talk about each individual plot. We're going to take an estimate of how many chapters he might need to finish up the various plots. And then we're going to talk about which potential scenes or parts of the story he might be having trouble writing emotionally. He's going to have to kill some of his characters, that kind of thing. But first. No, that's not what we wanted. We wanted tonight's top 10 list. That's right. LML's top 10 reasons why George R.R. Martin is stuck. It's done in the style of Dave Letterman, for those of you who know David Letterman. Number 10, plagiarism of J.R.R. Tolkien. That's right, he shouldn't have taken J.R.R. Tolkien's name. Oh, Cleo wants to be out here for the top 10 list. 1 second, guys. Hang on. Cleo, you bitch. Come here. Come here, you bitch. All right, buddies. See you later, Goose. See you later. Bye, buddy. See you later. I should have known that I would need to do my Dave Letterman impression with a cockatoo on my shoulder. So yes, tonight's top 10 reasons why George R.R. Martin is stuck. Number 10, he stole J.R.R. Tolkien's middle name, and now his karma has gone bad. Number 9, his computer is hidden under stacks of money. That could be a real problem if you think about it. There's there's a lot of money. A lot of money floating around the office there. It could be that computer is just buried under all the money and he can't find the keyboard. Top 10 reasons why George is stuck. Number 8, there's a new Dead & Company tour just announced. Dead & Company is, of course, the current incarnation of the Grateful Dead. And we all know that George is a big Deadhead. Yes, that's right. Lifelong Grateful Dead fan. Went to Mexico City for the big Eclipse concert a couple years ago. He's a big Deadhead, so maybe he's just, jamming out to the tunes, too excited about the tour, just can't finish wins. Number 7, he joined the Wheel of Time writing team because, the author who wrote Wheel of Time, he passed on before he could finish his story. So they needed help finishing the story. They called George. He's joined the Wheel of Time writing team, and so now he's just too busy to finish wins. Ironic, isn't it? Number 6, the planned grayscale plotline in Winds of Winter now deemed insensitive. That's right. After COVID, it just, a lot of people have lost loved ones to COVID, and the grayscale plot just had to be rewritten. So, moving on. Number 5, top 10 reasons why George is stuck. Number 5, he's run out of penis metaphors. Oh, yes. Where's my studio audience noise? I know you're all laughing at home. Yes, he's run out of penis metaphors. He's done towers and swords and all kinds of pokey things, and now he's stuck. He can't think of any more. Number 4, he's waiting on future George R.R. Martin to travel back in time and reveal the ending to him. It just hasn't happened yet. Maybe something's wrong with the Weirwood Dead. I don't know. Number 3, future George he already has traveled back in time, but he accidentally Hodored present George R.R. Martin. All of these blog updates are being typed by his minions, and George is catatonic, sitting in his house with his stacks of money. His future self did it to him, and it's all very complicated. The whole thing collapsed into a paradox, and so we don't have wins. Number 2, the Wall of Westeros is an analog for Pink Floyd's The Wall. And of course, Pink Floyd's The Wall, as we know, is a metaphor for the alienation that Pink Floyd felt between them, the artist, and their fans. And as we know, George's wall is 700 feet tall and made of ice. So what does that tell you? All in all, it's just another ice block in the wall. And tonight's number 1 reason why George R.R. Martin is stuck on Winds of Winter: no one knows how to fix George's old computer. Ba-boom. There we go. That's tonight's top 10 list of why George R. Martin is struggling. Thank you for coming. And we're all done. That's it. That's the stream. No, I'm kidding. We've got more. I did kind of have fun doing that top 10 list, though, as you could tell. So perhaps more top 10 lists in the future. We shall see. All right. So now that we've, and of course, yes, he does run a very old computer. I think I have a picture of it too, actually. Yes, let's see. Here it is. It's right here. That is George sitting at his computer. As you can see, it's a very old computer. And no, I'm kidding. This is actually the Remington Univac from 1951, world's first computer. But George wouldn't use something like that. His computer was made in the 1980s, which is much more recent. Or something. Yeah. Let's see. Do I have a picture of George's computer? I thought I did. Yep. This is George's actual computer, friends. As you can see, it's a DOS computer. So this is literally the computer that that I was playing Donkey Kong on a computer like this when I was 5. My dad is an old computer programmer, and he this is WordStar running on DOS. And my dad, early computer programmer in the 80s, brought home one of the first personal computers. And I remember playing, like I said, Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. That was the best one, Donkey Kong. And yeah, that's where George is. So yeah, the real truth is that the computer crashed. There's no backup. He didn't back it up onto floppy disks, and he had to rewrite the entire book. That's what happened. Hopefully not. Hopefully not. But that's real. It's a real picture there. That's yeah. We don't have to worry about any computer hackers. No Russian hackers can touch Winds of Winter. But God help us if George spills the coffee in the wrong place. So George looks like he only types with his index finger on the right hand. Minty says, yeah. As an advanced hunt and peck typist myself, I can lob no stones. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've lightened the mood a little bit, let's get into the serious stuff. So things that George has struggled with before. Most of these have to do with pacing. So first we had the 5-year gap, right? George planned on having a 5-year gap between the 3rd book and the 4th book. So after Storm of Swords, Arya was supposed to spend 5 years in the House of Black and White, and we're just going to come back and find that she's an assassin. Dany would have stayed in Slaver's Bay, and a lot of that Marine stuff that we had to see in the 5th book. I liked it, but it was a bit drawn out. Some of that stuff would have happened off screen. Same thing with Sansa in the Vale with Peter Baelish. You could see how George was setting things up for all the characters, George, and then John at the Wall, where all the young characters could have been doing stuff for 5 years or so, and then we could come back and everybody's a little older and we're telling the story in flashback. George tried that. It didn't work. That's what he said. It did not work. And so he abandoned that idea, abandoned the 5-year gap, and so that was certainly a miscalculation. And so now, he said if a 12-year-old has to save the world, so be it. But basically, yeah. So now we're stuck like this, like the Arya Winds of Winter chapter where she's using sexual desire to murder somebody that deserves murder, granted, Wrath the Sweetling. But nevertheless, Arya's doing stuff that would make more sense if she was like 16. And had been spending 5 years becoming an assassin. Instead, we have this 11-year-old girl in this scene, okay? Same thing with Dany. Dany is like 16, and she's, I guess it's not unheard of in history for somebody that's 16 to take the throne and do stuff like that. Alexander the Great was very young. And I have missed a couple super chats already. I did see them go by. I'll go back and grab them. So, you know, Danny's very young, John's very young, but that's the point. George has previously planned to have a 5-year gap, but then he said it didn't work to do all that in flashback. And so he canned that idea. And let me just pull up real quick, guys. I need to pull up a different... I need the doc, the nimble doc, so that I can get the missed super chats. Minty scoops them up when I miss them. And that way I don't miss them. So let me just pull that. Where are you? Where are you, nimble doc? Got a lot of docs lately. Been writing new scripts for the new channel. Been doing... in case you didn't know, I started a new channel, Mythic Concepts. Got that Kali video out. And I've got a bunch more plans, so I've been writing stuff for that. Make sure you're subscribed. You can just search Mythic Concepts to find it. It's very easy. Jennifer sent in a $5 super chat. No comment. Lord Luke says, George seems more interested in world building than story writing. That's a great point. We'll start with that. Yeah, so he definitely does. You know, every time he tries to push the story forward, he instead branches out sideways with new side characters and new world building, and he really does. I mean, the whole Fire and Blood is a sort of side branching into world building, really. And so was the World of Ice and Fire. I'm not complaining. The World of Ice and Fire was awesome, and I do believe that the World of Ice and Fire is giving us a lot of symbolism, clues, and clues about mysteries like the Great Empire of the Dawn that we need to know before the story is over. Similarly, I think Fire and Blood is setting up some of the dragon fights that we're going to see at the end of the story. I think he wanted to give us a good, clear view of just how destructive dragon fights are, how horrific it is to use dragons in warfare before Dany comes to Westeros, so we know what that's going to be like. But really, George he does like world building more than writing sometimes, and it does seem like he, you know, tends to side branch off into either writing his own fake history or world building. Yes, you know, like more mythical, ancient world building. And we love the world building, certainly. I love the history stuff too, but you do have to go forward with the story at some point, and that is what we're here to talk about. So thank you for that super chat. And so, yeah, he struggled with a 5-year gap. What else has he struggled with? Oh, super chat, sorry. Damn it. This will only just take a hot, quick second. One moment. There we go. Now what I have done is I have set up Theremin Cam. How do I switch to Theremin Cam? Oh yes. We do it like this. So if you want to make stuff like that happen, you can send in a super chat, and I'll try to keep it a little less self-indulgent. But yes, there was a super chat right here. It's from Indie Mike. Just wanted to say thank you for carrying the torch while we wait for the new content from George. We all appreciate it very much. I am going to, about halfway through, we are going to turn this into a real quick channel update, and I'm going to ask you guys what kinds of stuff you want to see going forward. Oh, louder. It needs to be louder? Okay. Okay. That should be louder. All right. So like I said, what was I saying? Yeah, we're going to do a channel update about halfway through. We'll talk about what we're going to do going forward. But let's keep on the topic here with my divided screen. So George struggled with the 5-year gap. He struggled with the feast dance structure. Okay, so after the 5-year gap was tossed out, he comes back and he's like, okay, we're gonna watch. I'm sorry, we're gonna we're gonna look at all these. It didn't work to tell the story in flashback, so we need to see everything as it happens, right? So then the book was too big. Feast. Some of you guys might not know this. A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons is supposed to be one book. Those events are happening concurrently, but he divided them by character and by region. So essentially, Feast and Dance is one book that's twice as big as a book is allowed to be. And if you can see, like, Dance of Dragons here on the shelf, it's a fat book. It's got a big fat ass. Yes, it does. You can't really make books much bigger than that. And you can see my paperbacks over here. Feast is giant. Feast definitely couldn't be any bigger. A dance is about the same size. So he had to cut the entire book in half. Then he couldn't even finish Dance of Dragons where he wanted to. Right? Dance with Dragons was supposed to end with the Battle of Ice and the Battle of Fire. The Battle of Fire being Meereen, and the Battle of Ice being the Battle of Winterfell with Stannis and the Boltons. That was all supposed to happen inside of A Dance with Dragons. So the Dance with Dragons had this big climax of these two battles that totally cleared the board. But instead, he's been leaking out some scenes from those battles in the TWOW advanced release chapters. And he still hasn't even worked his way through those entire battles. So we've got like the first 15% or something of the book that's just going to be stuff from Dance that didn't fit in Dance. So we have to wonder if this has set everything back and he's now having a problem ending the Winds of Winter at a climactical point that he was aiming for. So then the Meereenese Knot, of course, is what held him up writing Dance with Dragons. The Dance with Dragons took like 7 years to write. Okay. Dance with Dragons took 7 years to write. And he basically said that it was all due to something called the Meereenese Knot, which has to do with when everybody was reaching... Sorry for the brain fart there. I just froze for a second. When everyone was reaching Meereen, right? Victarion's on the way there. Quentin's on the way there. Makoro, Marwyn, Tyrion. All these characters on the way to Slaver's Bay. And George actually wrote it several different ways. Hey, Indy Mike, thanks for joining the Squishers. Enjoy your emoji powers. And I can actually show you here with this on the screen. If you click the emoji button, you get these custom emojis. Somehow Beavis is still on there. But there's like a Weirwood, LML, GRRM, It's a Trap, The Nice Spider, Garth, Weirwood Paste, Stark, Targ, Baratheon Sigils. These are all things you get access to. Anywho. Yes. So the Meereenese Knot, George tried to write it several different times. Essentially, how everybody would get there. And he he came up with what he did, but he tried putting Quentin there before or after, Dany's wedding to Hisdar. So George definitely sometimes struggles with the fact that he's tried to write this story with so many POVs, far more POVs than really any other fantasy story. So it's really absurd. And that bogged him down with the Meereenese Knot. So he might have a new knot. Okay. A Dance with Dragons. Yes. Emotionally, the Red Wedding was very difficult. He is, he said that the Red Wedding was the last part of A Storm of Swords that he wrote because it was very tough for him. I mean, it was tough to read. It was a brutal chapter. But we know that George is not so cold that that he can just write stuff like that easily. It's hard for him to write about the death of characters that he loves, and we know that George lost 2 close friends last year. So very possibly there could be a Song of Ice and Fire characters that need to be killed that he is having a hard time with, or even not just killed, but just like tortured or just, He planned to put them in a bad space, and he's having trouble with it. Like the Shireen thing, for example. That might be something he's having trouble with for sure. Let me back this mic a little bit. I think it's a little hot. There we go. And then the last thing, self-imposed deadlines, HBO deadlines, every kind of deadline. He's blown them all off. He struggles with deadlines, but really I just think that's another way of saying he's struggling to write The Winds of Winter. No deadline seems to work for him. You know, he's tried to put the pressure on himself and say, oh, I won't direct any episodes of House of the Dragon, or I won't go to X and Y con or festival, which he loves the cons. And he can't, it doesn't work. That pressure doesn't work for him. You know, he would have wanted to try to release Winds of Winter when this HBO series was still running. That's how you sell the most copies of Winds of Winter. Release the book at the beginning of the last season or something, but he wasn't able to do that. So he's had all of these either real deadlines or just golden opportunities to release the book that he would have been working towards, you know, right before a con or something, right before Christmas every year, and he can never do it. So deadlines he struggled with that as well. Yeah, Brandon Sanderson just killed 948 new characters in 239 new books. It's funny because it's true. Funny because it's true. And if you want to support the program, of course, or send in questions or comments, you can do that with the PayPal function, which the Super Chat function, or the PayPal link below. Man, Goose is having a hard time today. Goose, what's wrong, buddy? Everybody send Goose their support. He's having a difficult time. So I'm pulling up my Patreon. One of the things about joining our Patreon here at Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire is that you get a chance to send in ideas and remarks before the stream, especially with Q&As I post, and you get a chance to put in your 2 cents. So I'm going to read a few different suggestions from there, and then I've got a few on Twitter, and we can talk about what some of the likely suspects are here. So well, just real quick, let me just go through this list. So based on what we've just said, the likely suspects of what George is struggling with, inspiration obviously is the first one. We're going to talk about some of the emotions that might be sabotaging that. He obviously struggles with pacing. So he could be struggling with any number of pacing issues with Winds of Winter. Emotionally difficult scenes, like I said, we're going to spotlight a couple of those. Because of that 5-year gap, he could be having issues with characters being too young to do certain things, and now he's having to write around that. There could be problems with magic. The magic is increasing here at the end of the story. He could be struggling to write it in a way that seems realistic and doesn't sort of break the vibe of Ice and Fire. And then also, hats tip to James Martin, you know, people are trying to guess his story all over the place, people like me. And maybe some of us have gotten a lot of it right, and that's made it less fun for him to bring the ending out because he feels like it'll be less of a surprise. But I don't know. I don't know about that one. That one I tend to think is very tertiary. I think pacing problems are definitely going to be at the top of the list. And that's what a lot of you said as well. So Elbon says, I think one of the things that's definitely tangling him up is that he has background plots of all the non-POV characters' schemes going on behind the scenes, and he can't get all the pieces to fit right, like making a watch. That's a good point, Elbon. So we're going to go through all the POV characters today. Not all the POV characters, but like the major areas where we have POV characters. But then beside that, he's got all these other characters. People like Loris or Marwyn or Stoneheart, or even smaller characters like Sir Hyle Hunt and Pod Payne, you know, that all need to have some kind of resolution. Alaris the Sphinx and all the Sand Snakes. And so, yeah, there's really an issue with how is he going to, tie in all the superfluous pieces, let alone resolve the main character plot. So it's just a tangled web that he's woven there. Oh, I got a couple of PayPals coming in. Thank you, folks. So yeah, LML foiled Martin with all my theories. Yes, I guessed the story. Oh, it's no longer fun to write it because LML guessed it. No, it's not. Please don't take that. Please don't let that be the thing you take away from the stream. So Beverly says, perhaps George painted himself into a corner on some topics surrounding Dunk and Egg and Fire and Blood 2, and needs to write those first before he can get out of his metaphorical corner in the winds of winter, without gigantic spoilers to Dunk and Egg and Fire and Blood 2. His reordering of the future releases suggests there might be an issue there. Well, that's an interesting story. Yeah, or maybe let's put it this way. Maybe he could use either Fire and Blood 2 or some of the Dunk and Egg stories as a way to resolve some problem in Winds. Like he can drop some, basically he can retcon, he can drop in stuff that's, quote, in the past right now, okay, that he can then follow up with later to help him get rid of Winds. So that when Winds comes out and somebody pulls a MacGuffin, if you will, some magical device out of some corner of the world that we've never heard about, it's like, oh yes, we knew that of course there were glass candles on Dragonstone, that can be used by Dany as soon as she gets there, because we found that out in Fire and Blood 2. Something like that. Definitely we're developing a lot of Targaryen lore. So potentially he could be inserting Targaryen stuff in order to fix things. But that's an interesting idea. And then the next one was Beverly. Oh, no, Jacob, sorry. That was Beverly last one. Jacob says he knows he needs more books but can't have them. Right. So, like, we've often wondered if it's possible that George is... they're not going to be able to finish the story in 2 books. We've been wondering that for years. And maybe he's fighting against that reality. Maybe he thinks, I don't have enough, time or steam to write 3 more books. So I've got to try to finish it in 2. And so he's really cramming and rewriting and editing to fit a bunch of stuff in Winds. So those were super chats. And that was a theremin. Although I forgot the theremin cam. Next time. I don't want to bog things down with my toys and tinkering, but we'll get theremin cam on the next one. So, oh goose. Indie Mike. Oh, I got Indie Mike's one, but I will give Indie Mike a theremin blast. We go like this, and then we go like this. All right. You guys let me know if this is getting obnoxious. All right. So then we've got more Patreon. That's right. We were reading the Patreon submissions, and that was a good one from Elbons. Jehosa says, I think George is definitely struggling with Daenerys, and this was definitely a popular answer, as a plot element, or at least how to effectively and credibly get her over to Westeros. Since the show got rid of Fagon as an element, she was able to move into Dragonstone without much of an issue, but that's really not something she can do in the books. Getting her in position to cross paths with the character she needs to is probably proving a lot more difficult than he thought, with his intention to wrap everything up in 2 books. So yeah, exactly just what I was saying. 2 books may not be enough. Dany's plotline in particular is running behind. And that's one of the first things I realized when I looked at where all the plots were. Things up north, it's kind of... it's like just about ready for the long night to fall. Everything has hit the fan, and Dany's still over in the Dothraki Sea, wandering around in the grass with Drogon. So yes, Dany seems to be like way behind, and yeah, we're gonna talk about that in detail. But a lot of you guys picked up on that. So Jason of the electric tea kettle fame, electric water boiler, Mr. T-Man, Jason. I think George is stuck trying to get all the key characters in place for the big crescendo. He has an idea of where they need to be, but since he's a Gardner-style writer, he has to make it happen organically. I specifically think the non-POV characters may actually be more problematic than the POV characters. So Jason is echoing the sentiment that we had earlier, that those side characters' plots may be tough to wrap up. But I would actually disagree with that. I think the side character plots are the things that are like the pressure release valves. They can come into other people's stories to make things move when he needs them to move. That's why you keep side characters around. So I don't necessarily think that's slowing him down. I think that those could actually be helping him. I think it's more a matter of the pacing myself, but we'll get to that. Libby says, as an artist myself, I'm a painter, I for one find that as soon as someone asks for something or is waiting for something or has commissioned something or just as soon as I have to paint it, I suddenly don't want to. I wish I knew why, but it's definitely got something to do with the basic urge to just make art and the idea that it shouldn't be forced. And poor guy, the pressure must be suffocating. So yeah, there's no question. Like I said, I want to psychoanalyze a little bit of that. But yes, that's definitely a problem. When I used to do visual art, I would have the issue of doing about 70 or 80% of something. And then when it comes to just sort of filling in all the details, I a lot of times would lose interest and not finish. That being said, this is George's magnum opus. And it's hard to imagine how he couldn't want to tell the end of this story. But there's no doubt that it's also become work and not just something he did for fun. Because when he started writing Winds, or writing a Game of Thrones, it was for fun because he was working in Hollywood, and that was kind of like work. And so he's like, well, I'll just write a fantasy. He was tired of having to write for shows where everything had to be practical and be able to be visually depicted. He's like, I just want to write a fantasy where I can do whatever I want. And he did that, and then they made it into a show. And now it's, turned into work that he has to finish. So that's why I think the Duncan Egg is a lot easier to write for him. Or like Fire and Blood. Let's see. So thanks, Libby. And then Major Woody says, Major Woody. I recall reading somewhere that George confided in someone that he killed a character but now realized he needs said character in order to have a story move along organically. My strongest belief, though, is that he's been tainted by the Game of Thrones show and is turned off by the idea of finishing Winds of Winter. I know when I have an assignment, I loathe doing it. I find every other side project in the world to keep me from doing that one, often critical task that I really should be completing. Add to that the feeling of being hamstrung by not having the 5-year gap that he planned on for so long. So yeah, hitting on some of the stuff that we mentioned, totally, yeah. So Ravenous Reader, and I'll open this in a new tab here. So Ravenous Reader says, his symbolism is fractal and open-ended. Has he become lost in his own mirror funhouse? Is he averse to the closure of finishing A Song of Ice and Fire? Maybe it's a way for him to trick death by having us enter but never exit his Weirnet. Not writing an ending is the epitome of his aesthetic, perhaps. So, my deadhead friend Shad shared with me the lyrics for a Grateful Dead song called Terrapin Station. George named his house Terrapin Station. It's either his studio or his house. I think it's his house. And it's about art, okay? Let my inspiration flow in token rhyme, suggested rhythm, that will not forsake you till my tale is told and done. When the firelight's aglow, strange shadows from the flames will grow, till things we've never seen will seem familiar. Shadows of a sailor, forming winds, both foul and fair, all swarm. Down in Carlisle he loved a lady many years ago. Here beside him stands a man, a soldier from the looks of him, who came through many fights, but lost at love. While the storyteller speaks, a door within the fire creaks, suddenly flies open, and a girl is standing there. Eyes alight with glowing hair, all that fancy paints as fair, she takes her fan and throws it in the lion's den. Which of you, to gain me, tell, will risk uncertain pains of hell? I will not forgive you, if you will not take the chance. The sailor gave at least a try, the soldier being much too wise. Strategy was his strength, not disaster. The sailor coming out again, the lady fairly leapt at him. That's how it stands today. You decide if he was wise. The storyteller makes no choice. Soon you will not hear his voice. His job is to shed light, not to master. Since the end is never told, we pay the teller off in gold in hopes he will come back, but he cannot be bought or sold. Inspiration moved me brightly, light the song with sense and color, hold away despair, more than this I will not ask. Faced with mysteries dark and vast, statements just seem vain at last. Some rise, some fall, some climb to get terrapin. Counting stars by candlelight, all are dim but one is bright, the spiral light of Venus, rising first and shining best. Oh, from the northwest corner of a brand new crescent moon, crickets and cicadas sing a rare and different tune, Terrapin Station. In the shadow of the moon, Terrapin Station, and I know we'll be there soon, Terrapin. So the paragraph that really jumps out, obviously this is about the muse and stuff, and thank you, Matt Diff. I'll read that in just a second. The one, yes, since the end is never told, we pay the teller, the storyteller, often gold in hopes he will come back, but he cannot be bought or sold. So what is that saying? He's like, storytelling isn't about finding out the end. It's about the act of telling and existing in the story. And sometimes we feel like we didn't get the end of the story. And so we're offering all this gold to the storyteller to come back and give us the ending. But he can't be bought or sold. And he might not come back. So that's wah wah. Like, that's kind of ominous, shall we say. But let me come back to this in a second. Matt Diff says, George has been out of the zone since Swords ended. It seems like he just doesn't have the passion for it he had then, and constant excuses to not write the story and work on side stuff. I actually think that Dance is some of the best writing. I really like Dance. I will agree, Matt Diff, that the story really does start to spread out sideways after Storm. The first 3 books are moving forward at a very good pace, and every time you get a chapter, there's stuff that's happened since the last chapter. When we get to Feast and Dance, it does feel like the pace slows down, and George becomes to get interested in the more granular storytelling. Some of the Brienne stuff, Tyrion on the Rhoyne, there's a lot of it. So I think that's what you're referring to, and I'd have to agree with that. So. Whoa, what was that? Wow, that was oh, I forgot the theremin cam again. Guys, I forget stuff. Sorry. But we got the noise. So there you go. So where are we here? Yeah, so thank you, Shad, for shedding shedding light on that angle of storytelling. And yeah, so yeah, that was tough. So that's Terrapin Station if you want to look up those lyrics. Thank you, Ravenous Reader. Good contribution there. Wiz the Smith had a comment, a couple of good comments. So changing direction from the show, or perhaps clarifying the outcome, even if it's a slight deviation, this might require rewriting loads of chapters while fleshing out and tweaking story arcs. So that was potentially a good observation. Yeah, George could be affected by the show, and he could be tweaking things subtly to make certain points about, like Fire and Blood has some real subtle clapback against Dave and Dan. If you look, I forget the examples, but there's a few lines about. There's one in particular about like really bad storytellers and the things that they do that seems like a veiled shot at Dave and Dan. So it could be that the show is affecting George on a granular level of he might be retweaking plots. I think it's more of an emotional effect, but that is a good point. And then Wiz continues, too much editing. I have visions of him rewriting half the book. Yeah, I'm afraid that could be happening. That would be really disappointing. You know, kind of like the Trent Reznor Zach De La Rocha album that was supposedly recorded but never released because they're both perfectionists and they couldn't. I'm going to go to my grave sad about that. Think about that, girl. We could have had a industrial hip-hop Zach De La Rocha 9 Inch Nails mashup album back in the early 2000s when people cared about that sort of thing. All right. So the amount of projects he's working on, obviously, we've talked about that. He's had none of this stuff before hitting it big with the show. So it's like a new chapter in his life, a fresh creative buzz, new shows, adaptations. Unlike in Hollywood where he was lucky to get anything past a pilot. Imagine how many projects he's turned down, discussed, had meetings about. We know George struggles to write outside his comfort zone of his office and cabin. All these distractions are time-consuming, but also exciting for George. Couldn't blame him for taking one eye off the prize. But the intricacies and astounding attention to detail in these novels is immense. Not only does he have to tie up the basic story arc, but all the symbolism and other tiny details would obviously make a self-confessed slow writer even slower. It's a huge task. So yes, let's put it this way. Trying to garden a story this big is very ambitious. It's really ambitious. I mean, it's not something that people do. Most writers use, the Wu-Tang Rage tour that never finished. That's right. Although I went to one of those shows and saw the end of Wu-Tang and all of Rage. And not only that, I jumped the fence like a rebel because it was sold out. We drove 2 hours and it was sold out. We jumped the fence, me and my friends, my bandmates, and I got this little scar right here that I have on my forearm. I don't know if you can see it. This scar is from a chain link fence that I jumped over to see Rage Against the Machine when I was like 19. Oh yes, I'm a rebel. So, in any case, let's see here. And yeah, if you're tuning in late, my general take on all of this, guys, is that George wants all of these other prequels and side projects are not going to succeed if George can't put Winds of Winter out. Too many people are bitter about not getting Winds, justifiably, I would say. And if he tries to, not he, but him and HBO and everybody else try to put out all these shows and he can't put Winds out, it's going to be really hard. This is why I don't think the other shows being a distraction is the real reason why Winds isn't finished. Because, as any marketing person will tell you, anybody that has a stake in the shows, HBO, whoever else, the various showrunners, they're hoping that George finishes Winds. If George finishes Winds, that's going to be like a huge boost of enthusiasm and power and wind in the sails, if you will, wind in the sails of all the other projects. But without Winds of Winter, there literally will be no wind in the sails of these other shows. There's the metaphor. It's right there. Literally, these side projects are like ships in the harbor. Boom, and they need wind in their sails, and that wind is the Winds of Winter. So yes, all of you guys are like, I don't care about any of this unless he finishes Winds. Yeah, that's how most people feel. That is how most people feel. And it's kind of an elephant in the room that George is avoiding. So let's do some psychoanalysis here. Let me grab. In fact, let me play the theme. Let me play the funky music, and I'll be back in 30 seconds. Let me play the funky music, white boy. It's that time. And we're back. Sorry, I had to do like 4 things with that break. All right. Praise Garth. So, let's psychoanalyze our friend George R.R. Martin. Can you praise Garth with gin? Maybe for like 1 day. Is there an ignored super chat? Do not feel attacked, my friend. Minty's scooping them up. And I will still get them. Gerald Garcia. Oh, Gerald Garcia. That's awesome. Happy spring equinox. Praise Yostre. Praise Garth. One of these days I'll remember the camera and do the thing all at the same time. Very cool. Thank you very much, Gerald Garcia. Matt Diff. Oh, I read that one. Nice. Somebody's doing donuts outside. Can you hear that? That's awesome. Sacto. Yes, it's a theremin. Like I said. Here, let me just answer this other super chat on Theremin Cam so we can just do this officially the right way. Joe Mistretta, since dance, I've felt George has felt pressure to be too clever and complete. The story became way too big for him. All right, anticlimactic, but there we go. Yes, I do think this could it become too clever and complex? Potentially. I mean, he does put a lot of pressure on himself. I think cleverness is something George has coming out of his pores. He's very clever. I don't know that there's a lack of cleverness. However, obviously there's like friggin' so many POVs. George should get a co-author to finish his books, Alex says. You know, Alex, that's a good idea. That's kind of, well, let's psychoanalyze George first. But yes, that is one of the things I came to, like, hey man, if you're really having so much trouble, like, there's creative people out there that are enthusiastic about A Song of Ice and Fire that'd be happy to shut down their YouTube channel and help you, co-write some things. I just, maybe someone like Alt Shift X or, I'm just somebody. There's got to be somebody out there that would be willing to do that. Sorry. I had something in my throat there. Okay, so Dreamer out there says, I feel George may have slipped from his fictive dream. It's hard to get back. His own words could come off fan fiction-y now. Also, today, the world is more PC. He might be challenged to touch some topics. Thank you, Dreamer out there. Beep, 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 beep. That's a good one. I'm going to leave that setting right there. I like that. I like it when it's real low and round and, not too staticky. That's the sound I'm going for. So, yes. And again, let me know if this becomes obnoxious. I don't want to, kill you guys. But you seem to enjoy the buzzers and bells and whistles. So let's talk about the emotions of this thing. Trying to garden a huge epic fantasy is ambitious. It's very ambitious. Many people probably said it couldn't be done or wasn't a good idea. He doesn't like to outline. George has said that when he outlines things, he doesn't want to write it anymore because it becomes like work. This sounds familiar, right? So like he's got to follow the inspiration. It's inspired writing. Now, I have defended this approach in the past because I think George's writing is more inspired than other people's books. That's why I like A Song of Ice and Fire. Oh yes, and going back to one of the last comments, I don't think George is afraid of being controversial politically or writing tough stuff. That's never really seemed like something that he's afraid of. I have seen a little bit of an evolution in certain things, parts of his writing. Yeah. So, yes, George is doing this. He's gardening his way to a gigantic epic fantasy with 41 POVs. It's a ridiculous thing to try to do. It's very like, they said it couldn't be done, so I built a fourth castle. That one burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp. But the fifth castle stayed up. So you think of the tale of Durin Godsgrief, which is taken right from that Monty Python sketch that I just quoted, where Durin Godsgrief keeps rebuilding castles, when the storm god knocks them down. Like, that's kind of George trying to garden his way to this giant epic fantasy. It's just crazy to try to do it. And the deeper he gets into it, the more emotionally he might become invested in trying to pull it off. So now he's like fighting off all these naysayer voices that he's always heard. That's not a good idea. You can't do that. And he's like, I want to prove that I can. And so he's just going further into this, trying to garden his way out. But like, this is exactly why you need an outline, is because of issues of pacing. Now, I do sometimes think that too much is made of George being a gardener. I think he does have an approximate outline in his head. He probably sketches out a few basic things, but he does not do the kind of detailed outlining that other authors do. So, and that's gonna add an emotional tone to it, because he's kind of getting defensive about the very idea of what he's done, as it becomes obvious that he's struggling with it. Obviously, many fans are impatient and rude. A lot of fans are very rude. We're all getting impatient because it's been 11 years. But it's been for years and years and years. Anytime George has posted any social media, anything, all the comments, there's like, where's wins? Where's wins? He'll never finish. I get those comments on my videos that aren't even about the writing process. Just a random video about anything, A Song of Ice and Fire, I'll get 2 or 3 comments. George will never finish. Your guys are dumb, blah, 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 blah. So there's a lot of rudeness in the fandom. Now, what I think has happened is that stuff has inflated in George's mind to the point where emotionally in George's head, it feels like that's a much larger percentage of the fandom than it actually is. So I think like Because you can tell when you read that letter, that first bit where he's like, I know some of you only care about wins and I feel sorry for you. Like, that was an edgy thing to say, quite honestly, and a little bit gaslighty, if I may be so bold. And you guys know that I love George and defend George. And my whole channel is dedicated to talking about the brilliance of his writing. However, for him to sort of say, I mean, I can't imagine typing that to my fans. Let's put it that way. I just have to be honest. I mean, saying I feel sorry for you if all you care about is wins. Like, most of us care about wins more than any other part of the story, obviously. I mean, that's pretty much every Song of Ice and Fire fan that wants wins. So anybody that is waiting for wins could potentially take that statement as written towards them. I feel sorry for you. Like, yeah, I'll finish when I finish, and you guys can... It's edgy. It is. It's edgy. It's a little elbow to that. Okay, so what does that tell you? It tells you that George is feeling a little bit bitter about people, you know, always basically not letting him enjoy his success, essentially. Always bugging him for the next book. So, thing is, now we're 11 years in, and even people like me who have always defended George, at this point, it's just like, yeah, man, it's been 11 years. Where's the book? Like, it's getting easier and easier for me to understand people being impatient. Now, of course, I don't think that ever excuses rudeness, and as impatient as you are for the book, as I always say, the only reason we're all here is because we love George's writing. His stories brought us all together. So I don't think there's ever any excuse, obviously, to be rude to George. But that being aside, people are rude on the internet. People talk a certain way on the internet. That's a problem with society more broadly. But the sentiment that's behind all of that is legitimate. People are impatient for the book because it's been 11 years. And he hasn't put out the book. And now he's getting his back up about people waiting for the book. And it's like, dude, we're all invested in your story. Not only that, he gave his story to HBO. He sold it to HBO. He made a lot of money from that, and I never begrudged him that. But HBO very clearly screwed it up. It's a punchline. I mean, I know there's a little hardened core of show defenders out there, but honestly, all of those people, if I may be totally frank, they have been hype riding the show from the beginning. There are certain websites and YouTube channels that all they ever do is act like the show's the greatest thing ever, and they're just trying to ride the hype of the show to lots of clicks and views. And that worked for people for years and years and years. And then when the show gave us an absolutely terrible ending, objectively terrible by anybody who understands story writing, sorry, but that's, I mean, when your ending becomes a punchline, it wasn't good, okay? It wasn't. And then the people who were hype writing for the show, what could they do? They had to defend the show because their fan base is based on praising the show, and they can't turn on it. And all these people also, a lot of those websites had access to inside information from HBO. So of course they're not going to say anything negative about it. So that's a whole dynamic that's been happening as well. But most of us know that there's this really bad smell in the room. You know, if Winds of Winter is not being out as the elephant in the room, the giant shit that it took that everyone has been smelling for 3 years was the show ending. It was a terrible ending, and we don't have anything else to go on. It's been 3 years, and even though Winds of Winter isn't the end of A Song of Ice and Fire, and therefore won't tell us how Dany's story actually ends, it at least would give us something to chew on, and we could see some of the characters going in different directions and be reminded that there's another story here, and that we don't have to just sit here and marinate in the smell of the giant dump that Dave and Dan took in our living room, which is what happened. We watched Game of Thrones in our living rooms. My room's messy, but sorry, but that's where we did. We sat on the couch together. We used to have watch parties. We watched the show in our living rooms for 8 years. And at the end of it, Dave and Dan pulled their pants down, You understand where this metaphor is going. They took a dump on our floor in our living room, and George has not done anything to fix it. George is very aware that the show ending sucked. He's very aware. Okay? He knows. He's a good writer. He backed away from the show. He's taken veiled shots at Dave and Dan to the extent that he could. There's no doubt that he knows that the ending was not good. So he, I'm sure, would have liked to have been able to bring out winds and cleanse the smell. That would have been like opening the window, chasing the elephant out. We could start cleaning up the elephant dung, okay? I'm sorry for working this metaphor here, but it really does stink in here. We do need to open the window. Winds of winter. Again, wind. We needed fresh air. We needed wind to push the bad air out and create a better smell. And George has been unable to bring any wind. I mean, he's been unable to do it. So obviously George is disappointed in himself. So again, George is feeling bad about himself. He's bitter about the whole situation. People are accusing him of selling out, and he's bitter about that. So there's a lot of problems. Yeah, we might need to take the carpet and just roll it up and bring it out to the dumpster and bring a whole new carpet in, quite honestly. So, sorry, let's reel it back in here. He's defended himself against the HBO criticism by saying, how many children does Scarlett O'Hara have? Which is a reference, I think it's Gone with the Wind, some old fucking movie that's also a book that my dad likes that I don't know anything about. I think it's Gone with the Wind. Point is, two versions of the same story. One of the characters has 1 children or 3 children. And George is like, well, how many children does Scarlett O'Hara really have? Making the point that there's different versions of a story. And in one version, she has 3 and one has 1, and neither's right or wrong. They're just different. And that's similar to what George has said about the ending of the show. He said, well, you've seen an ending, but not the ending. I will bring my end. People will see my ending when the books come out. So that tells you George is okay with HBO doing something different. He's going to do his own thing. Some things will be similar. Some things will be the same in detail, but different in tone. Blah, 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 blah. King's Landing will still get burned, but it'll make more sense. Bran will be a kind of Green Seer king, but it's going to make a lot more sense because he won't have taken all the magic out the way the TV show did. The problem with this defense is that George has not given us another book, so we don't know anything else about his story for 11 years. Guys, 11 years ago, I got married and got divorced in the last 11 years. I moved across the country and back. I've lived in 10 cities. I got married and divorced and engaged again. Sorry, Minty, I love you. Yes, I'll be married again soon. You get the point. A lot has happened. I've started a YouTube channel, run it into the ground on behalf of George. Not run it into the ground, but you know what I'm saying. Lots happened in 11 years. Let me see some comments in the chat. What were you doing 11 years ago? Swagger Dagger says, I was a toddler 11 years ago. No, you weren't. Swagger Dagger, you're not 13. But seriously, though. Yeah, when Brandon Sanderson did his Kickstarter, it was like, I've written 5 new books during the pandemic. I was worried about George, having a heart attack or picking up his old computer and, hurling it into the trash. I definitely was worried about that. I was in 7th grade, but yeah, Swagger says, was coming out of the Marines into college at the University of Houston. Mark says, I've married 2 kids and divorced. I was in 11th grade. Yeah, so you see what I'm saying? It's been a long fucking time. Okay? So let's get to the real ugly part. George has broken his promise to us. And I don't mean in a metaphorical way of by writing a series of books, he's making a promise to finish the story and he hasn't finished the story. That's also true. Let me grab something. Hang on. I feel like I may have missed a super chat too. Let me just check the Nimble doc. Okay, I'm looking good. Oh, I did get it. That's what it was. It was a PayPal. There was a PayPal, indeed. Which means just wanted to reach out and thank you on this day of ancient renewal and spring that is the spring equinox. Thanks for building this community with all the myth heads, especially during the last 2 years. Watching all the relationships blossom both online and in real life has been the greatest gift. I hope you know we support you across the spectrum of your humanity. Thank you. And that your success as a YouTube creator is not solely dependent on George. Your success is due to your hard work and transparency with your community. Oh gosh, I'm gonna cry here, man. Anyways, looking forward to the new channel's content and Mythhead Convention 2022 or whenever it's safe and practical. Wow, thanks, Steven. That's really touching. You know, that is one thing I've had to think about. You know, like, what am I really doing? What am I, you know, should I cover other stuff? I'm obviously made a new channel to cover real world myth. How should I cover A Song of Ice and Fire? And, you know, Minty said something similar to me. It was just like, you know, they come there for you. They're coming there to hang out with everybody. Oh, I don't even, I'm saying all this heartfelt stuff. You know, my effects pedals are close to my heart, though. I've loved effects pedals since I was 15, so that works. But no, seriously, like, yeah, I do feel confident. I'm going to keep bringing material to you. Let's go ahead and pop this question, though, while we're here. How would you guys like to see me cover A Song of Ice and Fire going forward? I work for you, okay? I am here. I am able to spend all my time doing this because you guys watch, because you guys join Patreon, because you guys send in PayPals. Okay? So, there was that. Yeah, tease. Yeah, I didn't do it all at the same time, but whatever. So yeah, what do you guys want me to do? I'm not gonna write my own ending. I'm sorry. I won't do fan fiction. I appreciate that. It's very flattering. But I couldn't and wouldn't do that. I do want to write my own fiction. So if I'm going to spend that much time writing, it's definitely going to be on my own fiction. But yes, so a couple of options about what we can do with this channel. I am seeing a lot of people that want me to write the own ending. I can definitely do videos speculating more concretely about how things will end, but I'm definitely not going to write a fan fiction thing. So I could try to cover other things like other shows or other movies. I'm obviously covering real world myth on mythic concepts, and I'm really hoping that channel takes off. That would be sweet. But for this channel, I'm definitely going to keep this channel going. I want to see if House of the Dragon is good. So a couple of things that we could do, guys. We could start reading through the Dance of the Dragons part of Fire and Blood. So we can do the chapter reread style where we're going over the story and pointing out the symbolism. That way we're still doing mythical astronomy and talking about all that stuff, but we'll also be getting kind of ready for House of the Dragon, getting familiar with the characters and stuff. So that's one idea that I had. Another idea, and I'll come back to the super chat in a second, Anarian. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the promises again in a second. So we could read through Fire and Blood, specifically the Dance of the Dragons part. Like I said, that is fresh material. We haven't done very much symbolic analysis. And we also haven't done, well, like I said, House of the Dragons coming up. So we could try to figure out how many Rainas and Rainieses there are. The other thing and also lots of new artwork is coming out for Dance of the Dragons. So we've got increasingly more artwork of the dragon fights and stuff like that. So that's cool. The other thing that we could do, tell me what you think about this. What if we read through the Silmarillion together? What about that? What do you think? The Silmarillion, which is, of course, Lord of the Rings backstory, Tolkien's masterwork of world building. It was the first fantasy book that I ever read, guys, because I had watched The Hobbit, the animated Hobbit, The first thing I ever read was the Silmarillion. I might have had Narnia read to me before that. But we could read through the Silmarillion. I could give you analysis of it on a lot of levels, and we could be whetting our appetites for the Lord of the Rings show that's coming out. Now, of course, the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon, they don't have rights to the Silmarillion, only the appendices of the Lord of the Rings books. However, a lot of the events of the Silmarillion are referenced in the appendices. So we know that some of the Silmarillion history will figure into the Tolkien show. We don't know if the Tolkien show is going to be any good. We don't know if House of the Dragon is going to be any good. There are reasons to be optimistic, and there are serious reasons to doubt. So I am not one who likes to prejudge things. I am hoping that both of those shows are at least watchable. But Silmarillion is my shit. I love the Silmarillion. I don't have it memorized as well as some of the channels that are like Tolkien-only channels. So I probably could not right now start whipping out like produced content about the Silmarillion. However, I do understand the stories and how Tolkien writes and his mythology. So if we read through the Silmarillion together, we could get a lot out of it. And by the end of it, I might be ready to do some more Lord of the Rings content. And that's really the only other stuff that I'm enthusiastic enough that there's also a big audience for me to cover. Like, I would love to talk about Dark in detail and go through every episode, but there's just not enough Dark fans to make that, a worthwhile undertaking. So, yeah, so Tolkien is okay. Like, the Lord of the Rings is cool. Silmarillion is where it's at, dude. So I will let you guys comment. I can't read all the tweet chat. I mean, all the chats right now. But those were a couple of my ideas. Read through Dance of the Dragons. Read through Silmarillion. I could also go back for some of my older ideas, like the Weirwood Goddess series and some of the lore that I haven't, touched in a long time, and explore that as well. Malazan is cool. I've read a lot of Malazan, but it's kind of, it's too up and down and too sloggy and complex for me. I couldn't do a whole channel about that. Dark is a show on Netflix. It's the best time travel show ever created. It's maybe the best TV show ever created. I love Dark. I recommend it really highly. So, all right, let's get back on track here. I appreciate your feedback here. Like I said, I do work for you guys. I have been sort of looking in the mirror and trying to figure out what to do here. Because like I said, George has kind of just broken a promise to us. This is a good segue. George has been saying for years, I will not do anything else until Winds of Winter. He said, for example, I won't go to X con unless I have Winds done. He said there was a con that was supposed to happen in summer of 2021. And he said, I won't go unless I have Winds in hand. That con didn't happen, but he also didn't finish Winds. He has said that he won't direct any episodes of House of the Dragon until he finishes Winds. And now he's just like, well, basically he's gone from saying, I won't do anything else until I finish Winds, to saying A Song of Ice and Fire is bigger than just Winds of Winter and the main book series. And it's also this and that and this and that. And I'm going to be very involved in House of the Dragon and very involved in Dunk and Egg. And these shows are my responsibility, and I'm going to make sure they're canonically accurate. And if you only care about Winds, I feel sorry for you. So there's no way to spin this. And again, I love George. I owe this entire YouTube channel, or not entirely, but in large part, obviously, to George. Some in some part to my own hard work, and in some part to you lovely people. But clearly, I love George. I'll defend George, all that stuff. But there's no way to get around the simple truth that he has changed his commitment here as far as Winds goes. He went from saying, it's the only, I won't do any of this other stuff until I finish it, to saying, how dare you criticize me for wanting to do all this other stuff when I haven't finished Winds. And so essentially now he's reasserting his right to revel in his success. So he went from saying, I know I want to do all this stuff, and you guys know I want to do all this stuff, but I won't do it until I finish Winds. Then he's kind of like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to do all this stuff and enjoy my success, and if you have a problem with it, that's too bad. That's the tone of that letter. It's very defensive. I use the word obtuse here. I think he is being obtuse about this. And he's broken his own promises. He's broken his own deadlines. He's broken the implicit promise to the reader of finishing the story. And he's specifically broken his word about what he would do until he finished Win. So, again, I love George, but those are facts. So we got to acknowledge those facts, because otherwise, and that's why I said his update is a little gaslighty. You know, it is. Oh, gosh, we haven't even gotten into the plots yet. Hang on. All right, we landed something there. DM Collins says, what about a reading series with lots of other fantasy and sci-fi that is referenced in A Song of Ice and Fire, like the Yellow King cycle, from many creators? Lovecraft, Burroughs, Ivanhoe, Spencer, Grateful Dead songs. Well, so I do some of that, certainly, but a lot of that stuff is actually outside of my knowledge. George is from a different generation than me, and I don't know hardly any of that shit. The Grateful Dead angles that I take all come from my friend Shad, who is a Deadhead. And a lot of the literature references that I mention are other people giving me that, because I didn't go to college. Truth, unfortunate truth. I just couldn't afford to. And so I've not taken a college level lit class, believe it or not. So I don't know a lot of the classics. And I don't know that I would have been able to comprehend them at that age either, too. I was just in a different headspace. So that's not, mythology is my level of expertise. I don't know as much about medieval history or about classic literature. So those aren't angles that I could really exploit too much. But you should definitely subscribe to Grey Waste Tim, who is doing really good content about the Yellow King stuff, in particular, Lovecraft and related Lovecraft authors. So DM Collins, make sure you're subscribed to Grey Waste Tim. There's nothing more up your alley in your whole life than his channel. And Narion Targaryen says, read Berserk. I don't know Berserk, but I'll check that out. So thanks for the recommendation. Three-Eyed Monkey says, as an aspiring writer, who's Berserk by the way? Who's the author? As an aspiring writer, you should take every character arc, break down their technical construction, and see where the rules of storytelling say that they must go. I think you could piece it together. So one thing that I could do, I kind of did that with Danny. So that was another option that I was wanting to give you guys as far as what do you want me to do. I could do more who is the real Jon, who is the real Jaime Lannister. That's one that needs to be done. Comparing the show character to the book's character. In order to do one of those, I basically have to do a chapter by chapter reread of that character's chapters through all the books. That's what I did for Danny. I read all the Danny chapters back to back. I did that right after the show ended to ungaslight myself. And as soon as I had done that, it became very obvious that they had missed the character. But I really needed to do that before I could make that video. So to do a Who is the Real Jaime video, that means I'm listening to all the Jaime chapters again, taking notes. So basically it takes a long time. It takes longer than making an Ice Spiders video even, or another lore video. So I was thinking about that though. Those are appreciated, those who are the real ones. Those videos go over well. So that's another thing I could do. And that's essentially what you're talking about, Three-Eyed Monkey. So that's a good idea, and thank you. Berserk is a manga. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I'll check it out. I am going to do a video about the Dark Souls lore. I'm going to give it a couple more weeks, I think, for everybody to work through the game, and so it won't be spoilerific. I don't play it, but a lot of you do and have been telling me about the stuff in there, which is really crazy. It sounds like a lot of mythical astronomy ideas are being used there. So I'm going to get the full reporting from the guys that are playing the game, guys and girls, of course. And I will also pull the footage. I got to watch the footage of the cutscenes and things that are on the website, on what am I saying? On YouTube. People put the cutscenes on YouTube because, like I said, I don't have the game. So I think I can study up enough on what's going on in order to make a video. But there's definitely It might just be called Elden Ring Confirms My Theories, because there's a lot of moon meteor stuff going on and Weirwood Net Nissa stuff going on. It's pretty wild from what I hear. Okay, so let me just check and see how I'm doing with the super chats. Oh, I got that one. Berserk has a hiatus every now and then, but the author never promises that he would have multiple chapters. George is a promise breaker. So I see what you're saying. So it's just an ongoing series. Yeah. Maybe that's what George should have said, is that it's just an ongoing series. So we're ready to get into the plot lines problem. But let me just wrap up this thing about the emotion. So George, like I said, he's bitter about a few things. He's disappointed about a few things. And he's also feeling guilty about a few things because he's let himself down. And then add all of that negative emotion on top of the basic psychological effect that we talked about earlier, which is that it's easier to start something than it is to finish it. And once everyone is waiting for it and expecting it, it becomes more like work and less like inspired creative passion. And we know that George is an artist who really needs to feel inspired in order to work. And that is really the crux of the problem, is that George is clearly lacking inspiration, or else he'd be able to finish. And that's the only thing that can prevent George from writing, is a lack of inspiration when it gets right down to it. If he was inspired, he would be writing the story. He's not writing the story because he has a lack of inspiration. I don't know how else to say it. So, George, if you're watching somehow, I don't know, take some time off, cleanse your chi, do what you need to do. Here's the thing, guys, think about this. George could have taken 6 months off from all this stuff at any time in the last 5 years and let it go and gotten himself right so he can write again. If you're burned out with something, you know what I mean? Do something. I just don't understand why George can't find a way to find the inspiration to finish his story. It's his story. He's the only one who can finish it, guys. I can't finish it. No one else can finish it. No crowdsourced fan fiction can finish it. I mean, we can explore ideas and enjoy the world that way, but we can't finish. Only George can finish the story. So it's up to him to find the inspiration again to do it. And that's all it comes down to. I hope that he can. I mean, he's an old hippie. So, like I said, George, do whatever you need to do, man. Cleanse your chi. Your wife is a witch. Ask her. Figure it out. Read the tarot. Light the incense. Take a vacation. Move the furniture around. Okay, you get my point. So, look. The plain fact here is that George is probably quit projecting onto him. You're not a mind reader. I mean, I don't really think I am projecting. I think it's a simple matter of, logic. When he tells us that he's a gardener, not an architect, he's told us that if he outlines the story, then he no longer feels inspired to write it, and then he doesn't want to finish it. So it's not really projection to understand that George needs to feel inspired to write the story. And that if something like an outline or anything else, like expectations, make it so that it's more like work and less inspiring, then he can't write. So I'm really just going on George's own words and not projecting. But I appreciate your 2 cents anyway. And it literally was 2 cents. So, all right. So the thing is, like we said, George is not very good at pacing. He is not very good at pacing. We've seen that. All the mistakes that he made previously with Meereenese Knot, the feast dance thing, the 5-year gap, these are all pacing issues. So it's most likely that the problem he has is primarily one of trying to get, setting aside the emotional issue, like the technical issue here is likely to be one of getting everything to come together. That's essentially the Meereenese Knot problem. So it's probably something along those lines. Twitter user @Deleterious says, I think he has trouble writing all the remaining Dany chapters just to get her to Westeros. Dany's worshipped on the Mother of Mountains. Dany saves Meereen. Dany forbids slavery forever, backed now by new Dothraki fanatics. Dany conquers Karth, maybe. Dany to Volantis. Dany to Braavos. So let's go through it, okay? Let's, like I said, get an idea of how many chapters it might take to get somewhere. So we left her off in the middle of the Dothraki Sea. So we need at least one chapter to show her journey to Vaes Dothrak. We're going to need a chapter probably to set up the climax there, where she's in Vaes Dothrak, the tension is building, something's happening with Drogon, the other cows are being intimidating, the peril has to be heightened. So then we could maybe have a third chapter where there's climax. She ascends the Mother of Mountains with Drogon, takes control of the Dothraki, and even if George cuts away there and doesn't give us any more Dany POVs until she literally rides onto the scene in Meereen, which I think would be a cool way to do it. Minimum of 3 chapters there to move Dany through the Mother of Mountain stuff, and very easily more. I don't know he's bitter, though. No, I think the bitterness comes across pretty obviously in the letter, Nick. I'm not going to keep arguing with you, but if you read the letter when he says, if you're waiting for Winds of Winter, I feel sorry for you. And he went on several lines about, oh, yes, I hear about it endlessly. When will he finish Winds? When will he finish Winds? Well, I'm working on it. I get tired of saying it. That's very bitter. Go read that letter, Nick. I mean, it's a subjective judgment, yes, but I think it's very obviously bitterness. And all of the larger vibe of how dare you criticize me for not finishing, and I should be allowed to enjoy all of my stuff. It reeks of bitterness. So that's my opinion, but I'm sticking to it. And I'm done arguing with you also, because you're not really bringing much to this conversation, quite frankly. So 3 chapters there. Then even if we get a cutaway where, like I said, we're going to have other POVs in Meereen, and then maybe Dany arrives, suddenly and by surprise, that would be cool. But if not, then we need another chapter to show them going back to Meereen. I think George will probably skip that. Then we have several more chapters of the Meereen battle, right? We've already gotten one Tyrion chapter, a Barristan chapter, and a Victarion chapter, all about the Battle of Fire, and it's not even halfway done yet. So we've got at least 3 more chapters, probably one from each of them, in order to finish up the battle and get to the point where we have this council of Westerosi fools of Barristan, Tyrion, and Victarion. Then Dany's got to return to Meereen, and we're going to need a chapter or 2 to resolve the Meereen plotline. It would be a miracle if that could happen in 2 chapters. And then to get people ready to leave, getting on the Ironborn ships, putting Dario in charge, or executing the Green Grace, figuring out what his Dar's doing. And then, oh, by the way, what's Mokoro up to? What's the Dragonhorn doing? Did one of the dragons fly away? Is Euron present somehow with magic or in person? Marwyn the mage is going to show up with glass candles so Dany could do some magic. What's going to happen with that? And then there's the Shave Pate, Dario, Green Grace, and his Dar. So there's a lot to resolve there, even if George is ready to just get things moving. Again, at least 2 chapters to resolve Meereen and leave after Dany gets back. So we're up to 12 chapters at least with this Meereen plotline. That's essentially what I did on the math side. Yeah, and Josh makes a lot of sense. if you read his apology to fans at the beginning of A Dance with Dragons and compare that to the tone of the blog post, it's very different. And really, this new blog post is a lot different than anything else he's said before. I mean, that's why I think the fandom is taking it the way it is. Like, the fandom is taking it really hard. Preston Jacobs' video had a picture of Winds of Winter in a trash can on the cover of his video. And he's not, I mean, it's hyperbolic, but he's not wrong. The message of this update was like, Winds isn't my priority anymore. Winds isn't, you know, this is bigger than Winds, and I'm doing all this other stuff. After saying he wasn't going to do all this other stuff until Winds was done. So, I mean, you know, how many chapters does Danny usually get? I'm not really sure. I didn't go back to calculate that because I think if Winds is going to try to take care of all of the different characters in one book, it's probably not going to follow averages of how many chapters are there for each character. But these 12 chapters that I came up with, only half of them are Danny's. You know, the other half are Tyrion, Barristan, and Victarion chapters. So that 12 is a low number. It could be a lot higher. Could be a lot higher. So the North plot line is the furthest ahead. It's seemingly we're almost ready for the long night to fall. Jon is dead. All the chaos is hitting the fan. The Battle of Winterfell is just about to happen. You know, so starting with Bran. Bran only had 3 chapters in Dance. We could see something similar where Bran, okay, Josh says about 10 chapters Danny usually gets. So I've got 6 for her here. And I think it could be less than 10. It depends. Like I said, Danny's plot line is the farthest behind. Because, yeah, let me go back. I'm sorry, I finished too soon. Let's go back to Danny. All of the stuff that I did only gets Danny on a boat in Meereen. Is that as far as Danny's story going to go? Like, I thought that she would at least get back to Dragonstone, if not do something, like maybe attack King's Landing or something. This seems like none of that stuff's even going to happen in Winds. Because if he wants to bring the plot forward, well, then we'd need a couple of chapters of her sailing. Is she going to burn Volantis? I mean, she is going to burn Volantis, but is that going to happen in Winds? So, if she needs to also burn Volantis and reach Dragonstone, then you'd have then you'd have like fuck. I mean, you'd have a lot of chapters. You'd be up to like 15, 17 chapters. Yeah, is she going to go to Pentos and barbecue Illyrio? I don't know. I can see George bringing Illyrio to her. But you see what I mean? Like, if George wants to land Danny on Dragonstone, we're now up to like 20 chapters here. And that's a third of the book. The book's only going to have about 60-some chapters. That's as many as can fit. At least it's hot girls and boys. It's equal. So there's that. Do you think he's stalling out on Winds because he realized if he doesn't finish Fire and Blood or Dunk and Egg, that Winds will spoil the rest? No, I don't think so, because he originally wanted to finish the entire series before the show was over. So all of this stuff was supposed to come after the series. The series was supposed to be done. Then he was going to write more Dunk and Egg and Fire and Blood and all that. That's another one that George broke a promise for. He said he wouldn't work on Fire and Blood 2 until Winds was done. He's already done several hundred pages of Fire and Blood 2, and it sounds like that whole thing is going to come out before Winds does. So there's a lot of broken promises here. There really is. Thank you for the super chat. All right. Cool. I've got 450 people watching the stream, so obviously it's not too annoying. Thank you, guys. click the like button. Most of you already have. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Thanks for coming here and hanging out while we go through this fun stuff. So, you see the problem with Dany. Dany is way behind. We would need 20 chapters just to get her to Dragonstone. And what is everyone else doing all that time? Well, let's figure it out. So like I said, Bran, he's the furthest ahead. He probably will only have a couple chapters. He kind of knows too much. The main question is, when will he leave the cave? You know, if George wants to stretch it out, we could just have 3 more Bran chapters of him seeing visions in this next book, and he doesn't even leave the cave until book 7. And the 2 ideas for him leaving the cave, Quinn and I came up with the idea of him taking the underground river. Meera Reed knows how to make boats. She's a Cranogman. They know how to weave stuff, make a little reed boat with bark and roots and stuff like that. So they absolutely could... let me get the notes back up so you can see that. They absolutely could leave via the underground river in Bloodraven's cave. We know there's lots of caves under Westeros. Those caves must at least go back to the wall, if not further. The wildlings supposedly used the caves to come out around Long Lake one time in the Gendel and Gorn story. So, you know, that's one thing. Preston Jacobs has a really cool theory about Bran and Hodor escaping through the sinkhole, which is 3 miles away. Cold Hands refers to it. And he's got an elaborate theory. It's part of his time-traveling Bran series, which is really good, I have to say. And he's pointed out some really good foreshadowing that kind of makes sense, where Meera might use her climbing skill to climb with Bran out of the sinkhole, and it'll leave a trap for the Whites and all this stuff. So he's got a detailed scenario that I think makes a lot of sense. So either way, you know, Bran could leave overland or he could go underground. Bran may need help. You know, maybe resurrected Jon will show up to help Bran return, just as Cold Hands helped him get out there. Maybe Cold Hands is still around. Maybe Benjen has been turned into a Cold Hands, and he's going to help Bran. So there's 3 different options to help Bran get back to the wall if he needs help. But yeah, Bran is pretty far ahead, and any of his chapters are going to have weird visions that are going to reveal a lot of stuff. So that could be good. That'll help George advance the story. But we know that Bran only had 3 chapters specifically because he knows too much now. That's why we only had 1 Mel chapter. So 3 to 5 chapters for Bran was my guess. As for Jon, he's dead. So we'll at least get 1 Wolf Dream POV, right? The sinkhole wouldn't... I don't know where the water would come from to fill the sinkhole, and everything's frozen. So no. I mean, check out his videos if you want to see that theory, but I don't think that's an issue. So Jon's dead. We'll get a Wolf Dream POV. We need to figure out about RLJ. He needs to wander the crypts, probably finish that crypt dream. His body could be stolen by the others. This could be a way to buy time. Essentially, yeah, I know Cold Hands isn't Benjen. What I was saying is that, sorry, I don't mean to be, no Cold Hands isn't Benjen. What I meant was, Benjen might have been turned into a Cold Hands, because a Cold Hands is a type of thing. It's a Night's Watchman who's been resurrected, and somehow their spirit's been put back in their body, right? So this is what's happening to Jon. Jon is going to be kind of like Cold Hands. So it's possible that Benjen has been turned into a zombie and he's still out there. That's what I was trying to say. But yes, you're right. They're not the same. Let's see here. It could be a pattern, though, is what I'm saying. Because I think back in the day, the original Last Hero and his Night's Watchmen were probably all undead, Cold Hands, or Jon Snow type of skin changer whites. Because that's makes it easier to fight the cold. You don't need to stay warm, don't need to eat. So, makes it a lot easier to handle the Lands of Always Winter. Whites are ideal warriors to fight the others, as I always say. So with Jon, his plot line, it needs to be stalled. In the show, one thing that didn't really work is like having Jon get resurrected and then just having him resume normal plot activity where he's talking to Sansa about emotional stuff and going back to Winterfell and being elected king and basically just carrying on as if he was never resurrected. we know that resurrection is much gnarlier in the books, and that has to be accounted for. So I really have a hard time seeing Zombie John come back and do anything but basically high-level violence and magic. There will still be some emotional stuff, I would think, but you see what I'm saying? Like, John is past a transition point in his plot once he's resurrected. He's going to be a magical creature. People are going to look at him and think that he's terrible or godlike. He will be visibly resurrected in some way. He will definitely be more magical. He may have magic-looking eyes and stuff. We'll have to deal with the issue of, do people know that he's resurrected, or do people think that he abandoned the Night's Watch? Because it could be that he's let out of his vows because he's undead. So we got to deal with that. But one way that George could avoid having John walking around as a zombie for too long, when the sort of political plot is still happening, is that John's body could be stolen by the others, and we might not see him for a long time. What if, for example, we get a John POV, and we know that he's in Ghost, and we see the others come and steal his body? Very terrifying scene. They come to the wall. John's body whites and animates and, like, joins the army of the dead. And then we don't see John for the rest of the book. George could definitely do something like that. And we won't see John's corpse until, like, the end of the book or the next book, when the winds of winter fall and the White Walkers invade. It's like, oh, there's John. So John could be completely taken off the board for a while. Potentially. Just wanted to raise that possibility. If he is resurrected soon after his death, like halfway through the book, then George has to deal with what to do with him and how everyone else is going to treat him. So to me, again, it seems like the politics needs to be over when John turns into Wolf John, the ghost zombie, or whatever he is. So then going on, so it's hard to say how many chapters for John. Could be a few, could just be a couple, and he's put on ice, literally and metaphorically. So in Winterfell, there's a huge snowstorm and a battle happening. The Boltons are about to lose. It's probably going to be a multi-stage battle, right? Some of the forces are coming out to fight Stannis at the lake, the frozen lake. And then there's going to be some subterfuge with the Manderleys, and they're going to get inside Winterfell. So it's a 2-stage fight. We've already had a Theon chapter, and our POVs are Asha and Theon. So I would say at least 3 chapters to finish up the battle, on top of the 1 Theon chapter that we have, because we need a fight out at the lake, and then we need to take the fight to Winterfell. We've also got Mance potentially running around, and that's going to have to be addressed. So 2 to 3 chapters to finish the battle, a chapter or 2 of Aftermath. Then there's also Davos chapters. He went out to fetch Rickon, and the idea would be to bring him back to Manderley at Winterfell. So that's 2 to 3 chapters for Davos to be on Skagos and bring Rickon back. And then we have more Winterfell wrap-up, where Manderley is regent, and he's declaring Rickon the prince, and Stannis is going off to maybe go back to the Wall to learn about Shireen's burning, probably, or something, So then we have the question of what next. Probably, I think Winterfell will just sit there with Manderley and Rickon in charge for a hot minute, probably until the next book. But there is the question of, is Jon going to come down to Winterfell? There's also the question of, where are the Greyjoys going? Yeah, I do think Rickon's going to come back. It's the whole point of, he's turning into a wild Stark. See, that'll thing is, it'll be difficult. Rickon won't just be a little Stark 5-year-old boy you can sit on the throne, and then Manderley can act like the one in charge. Or maybe Manderley's son, if Manderley's dead. He's been wounded, it's hard to say. But somebody on Team Manderley will be in charge there, and will be a regent for Rickon. But Rickon will be hard to manage, so that'll be a fun, chaotic thing with the wild wolf child causing trouble in Winterfell. But then where do the Greyjoys go? Do they go with Stannis? Does Stannis send them back to the Iron Islands to begin some other plot line? We don't know. That's all an open question. So 8 to 10 chapters, at least, probably more like 12. And these are basically, again, Theon and Asha chapters that are showing us the Battle of Winterfell and everything going on there, plus those Davos chapters. Gus Mulder says, I struggled with writer's block myself. I hope George, working on other projects, brings back his original inspiration to finish the books. So that's what I was saying for a while, is that you guys shouldn't begrudge him doing other, you complainers out there, shouldn't begrudge him doing other projects, because he actually needs a certain amount of space that isn't A Song of Ice and Fire proper, or that isn't Winds, to have an outlet. You can't just stare at the thing you need to do if that's your challenge. You need to do other stuff and have balance. So that's another reason why I don't think the other projects are holding him back. The main problem is that he can't finish Winds. Like that is the core issue. Yeah, writer's block, lack of inspiration, whatever you call it. BGH says, since I've watched most of your content, I owe you more than $10. What's the timing of John's last chapter? Is there evidence that it's much further than the other plot lines? I mean, George has said that there's a little bit of flexibility as far as chapters coming one after another that might be slightly before one another in time, but not too much. So John's death is taking place, approximately concurrent in time. Some of the Battle of Winterfell stuff could be happening before John's actual death. And we could see George use that a little more. Maybe he'll just do a bunch of catch-up in the beginning of Winds on the eastern plot lines with Tyrion and Vic and Barristan, and sort of advance those some, and Dany, obviously, before going back to some of the northern plot lines. So he could do something like that to make it balanced. But obviously you see how the pacing is a problem. So then at Castle Black, of course, Melisandre is our only POV until Davos returns, if Davos returns to the Wall in Castle Black. So we need to see some aftermath of Jon's murder. The Shireen burning is going to happen. Mel may take place in Jon's resurrection, or we might see Jon's body stolen by the others. So I would probably say 3 to 4 chapters of Melisandre. That's about as much as we would get there. Oh, and thank you for those last 2 super chats. I feel like that one may have burned some eardrums. Sorry for those of you who have pets in the background. Again, let me know if it's too obnoxious. Riverlands. So the Riverlands... Actually, let me take a drink of water. I need water. Do you guys want to hear the funky music? I need 30 seconds, guys. Let me hit the music one time. For your mind. You guys always ask for it. I think you like it. Now with accompaniment. All right. My wife is no longer fazed by anything she hears me listening to on these streams LOL. Is that a phase modulation phaser joke? All right. Probably not. Probably only in my mind. So the Riverlands, we've got Jamie and Brienne POVs in the Riverlands. So obviously there's going to be a confrontation. And yes, that was the entire universe. Just to let you know, in case you didn't know that, what you just watched is Symbolism. Okay, so if I share... well, here, if I do this, just move this out of the way for a second. You can see my Sri Yantra. Sri Yantra. The Sri Yantra is my symbol. I've adapted. I've surrounded it with sun rays. But this Sri Yantra is sacred geometry. And this is supposed to express the totality of the universe in 10 dimensions. There's 10 triangles. And it's like an overhead view of the multidimensional universe, something like that. It also represents creation, because the universe is always expanding. So this is the creative expansion of the universe. I then surrounded it with sun rays, so that because it represents the fire of creativity, which is a consuming fire, but a creative fire. So the Sri Yantra is... so I guess the point is I layered it over a picture of the actual universe because the Sri Yantra represents the universe. So I'm combining the thing that the symbol represents with the symbol itself. That's the whole point of that. So now let me rebuild my... Oh, that's supposed to be up here. And we'll put this back down here. And bring this back over here. All right. We had to do a little bit of symbolism, right? Otherwise, it's not mythical astronomy. Oh, we're down to 10 viewers. No, I'm kidding. Okay. Riverlands, we've got Jamie and Brienne POVs. And obviously, the first thing that needs to happen is that Jamie is being led down to the cave. Stoneheart's cave. And there's going to be some kind of confrontation. Very likely, what's going to happen is Stoneheart is going to do her same old trick of leveraging the threat to kill you to make you do stuff. She originally had told Brienne, you must bring Jamie to me or you will hang. And she refused, and so they hung her. But then at the last second, she shouted the word sword, meaning give me the sword and I'll go do what you say. So probably we'll see the same thing happen again, where Stoneheart will demand that Jamie has to do something for her, namely help return Riverrun back to Tully hands. Riverrun is being held by the fray that married into the Lannisters. I forget which one it is, but he's very hateable. And so I think Jamie could very easily play a role in basically using subterfuge to open the gates from within and turn Riverrun back over to the Tullys. The price will be, the leverage will be Brienne. You know, Stoneheart will threaten to execute Brienne. So Jamie will be forced to choose between his loyalty to the Lannisters or to Brienne. We all know he will choose Brienne. And so Jamie's probably going to be compelled to turn Riverrun over or help turn it back over to the Tullys. Then Jamie and Brienne. So I've got the chapter count. There's going to be at least one chapter in the cave confrontation. Then Jamie's going to need probably 2 chapters at least to do whatever he's supposed to do with Riverrun. Brienne will probably be a hostage back in the cave to make sure that Jamie does what he has to do. So then we might get a Brienne chapter in the cave. Then Jamie comes back to the cave and they'll resolve the plot somehow. So now we're up to like 4 or 5 chapters. Then what? Right? Jamie and Brienne have to go somewhere else then. So there has to be a chapter or 2 to send them on their next journey and show them fucking. Because that's got to happen. So, sorry. Now we're up to like 7 chapters, 8 chapters. And if you think about it, 7 or 8 chapters between Jamie and Brienne, who are 2 characters that ate up a lot of chapters in Feast, that seems a little low. So really, I think we're talking about at least 10 chapters between the 2 of them. Then there's also the prologue, which is supposed to do with the Blackfish and Jane Westerling. So I think 12 chapters for the, if you want to call that all, the Riverlands plotline. Okay. King's Landing. Now we're really getting in trouble. King's Landing is another one where this is going to eat up a lot of time. So I guess you could say that Dany and the King's Landing plot line are lagging behind everything else, maybe. We've made a lot of noise already, but I didn't make any noise for those 2 super chats, so you know. So now we have done that. Let's get this up to date. There we go. Yeah, and Brienne's pretty damaged. Yes, that's right. She's going to need some leg potion or some cheek potion, for sure. Yes. So then we've got, let's see, King's Landing. Okay, so King's Landing, Cersei is our only POV in King's Landing proper at the moment. So let's go through the stuff that Cersei has to do, because Kevin is dead now. Cersei is getting ready for a trial. So there needs to be 1 chapter of catching us up what Cersei's doing and getting ready for her trial. Then the actual trial, which might be a trial by combat, or it might be a political event where Cersei assassinates people or blows shit up with wildfire. Any of that's on the table, but there's going to be some sort of Cersei trial climax. That's at least 1 chapter. Then we know that Fagon is on his way to attack King's Landing, so we will need at least a 3rd chapter after the trial's resolved to show Cersei having consolidated her power and getting ready for Fagon's attack. She'll probably be planning to use wildfire just like Tyrion did in the defense of King's Landing earlier. So that's at least 3 or 4 chapters. Then we have whatever battle is going to take place at King's Landing. That's going to be several chapters. Some of those will be Arianne or Jon Con chapters, but some of them will be Cersei chapters. So we've got at least 6 Cersei chapters in King's Landing. And then if she flees King's Landing back to Casterly Rock, that's going to be another couple. So we're talking about 6 to 8 Cersei chapters here. Then we have the invaders. Jon Con and Arianne, again, are the POVs. We've already had 2 Arianne chapters of her just getting through the Rainwood and going to Storm's End. Then we know there's going to be a battle at Storm's End. That will be a Jon Con POV. Arianne's going to get there after that battle, so there'll be an aftermath chapter. Then we got to figure out what's going on with Fagon and Arianne, and there's the whole Lady Lance plot where maybe Lady Lance is going to screw that up by having something with Fagon. And yes, she's too young. It doesn't matter. Whatever. She's already making out with the guardsmen and stuff, so she's old enough to cause trouble. That's the point. And again, to the point of like George isn't afraid of offending people or being politically correct. Like he's done plenty of stuff that's not that's plenty problematic. So I don't really think that's what's holding him back. But yes, the Lady Lance plotline. So then Arianne at some point is going to send word back to Dorne and say, I'm making this alliance probably, or no, I'm not. Then there's an invasion of King's Landing from the side of Team Fagon, which will be a Jon Con Arianne POV still. Then there could be the possibility of Dark Star and the Sand Snakes variously reaching King's Landing either during the battle or after the battle. I've got a theory about Dark Star stealing Dawn and then joining Fagon's Kingsguard, so that would be happening sometime around now. And 2 Sand Snakes, Tyene and Nymeria, Lady Nym, have been sent to King's Landing to cause trouble. Those aren't POVs, but those people are going to show up and do stuff, and they will have to be addressed. They will show up in Cersei's plotline, in Arianne's plotline, or Jon Con's plotline. Then Jon Con's got to go nuts. We know that the Jon Con ticking time bomb needs to explode. So that means grayscale. Maybe Jon Con falls down a well. Maybe he blows up some shit with wildfire. Maybe he finds out Fagon is fake and freaks out about it. Or who knows what. But there's a Jon Con climax coming. Then there's also the High Sparrow and the Faith and the Warrior Sons running around King's Landing. They are just another piece of the puzzle. They're not a POV chapter, but they're something that needs to be dealt with. So we're talking about 10 to 12 chapters here for John Con and Ariane to show you the invasion and the aftermath of King's Landing. Then we have Dorne. We'll have a few more Dornish chapters. We know that Areo Hotah is going to give us at least one chapter when him and Obara are going to beard Darkstar in his den. I think that could just be one. Could be two. No, the John Con falling down a well is a real theory. That would be Alan Cockshaw from the Mystery Knight would be the predecessor. There's a lot of parallels, and it's a good way to poison the water supply of King's Landing with grayscale. John Con falling down a well. That's not my theory, but it's a good theory. So we're going to get one Areo Hotah chapter of bearding Darkstar in his den. Then he's going to die. He's not long for the world, and it's Darkstar who's going to end up coming out with Dawn and coming to King's Landing. I think Obara and Darkstar will end up making an alliance, and Obara will live, but maybe she doesn't. Point is, Areo is the POV there. So whatever happens with that, we're going to see Areo die, and that's it. Then we'll see Fagon and or Obara. I'm sorry, not Fagon. Darkstar and or Obara show up in Fagon's plot at some point, likely with Darkstar carrying Dawn. So that's only one chapter or two for Areo Hotah. But of course, we know we're going to need a couple of chapters of Doran Martell watching oranges fall off the tree, meaning that he needs to hear about Quentin's death. Arch and Drink are on their way back from Meereen with news of Quentin's death, and I think with Quentin's body. So we need, obviously, one chapter for him to process that, right? Then he needs to get some bad news. He needs to get good news from Ariane initially about allying with Fagon. But then he's going to have the bad news about Dany being alive with dragons, and they didn't ally with her, but against her rival. So I would say there's going to be a couple of chapters of Doran Martell in Dorne getting news and updating us on certain things. Maybe just like 2 or 3, but then there's also the one Areo chapter. So we're talking another 3 to 5 chapters here from Dorne. Then we go to Old Town. We have the Damp Hair, and we have Sam Tarly for our POVs. There's already one Damp Hair chapter, being tortured and force-fed Shade of the Evening, with lots of phallic imagery. It's very terrifying. And there's going to be a big battle outside of Old Town. So we will probably get at least one more Damp Hair chapter. He might die in his next chapter. It's very possible. But at least one more Damp Hair, and definitely more Sam chapters. So we'll see the battle from Sam's view. We might see a chapter before that of just like getting ready for the battle. I expect Euron to win and to take Old Town. He may or may not crown himself king in Old Town. That's my theory. But he will definitely take Old Town and hold it. It's a very strategic point to hold. He won't just raid it. He's gonna take Old Town. He wants to get to the top of the tower to do Saruman things. You know, Euron almost certainly has glass candles. And there's no better place to use the glass candle than at the top. Then it will be like the Palantir, and George will have finished plagiarizing JRR. GRR will have paid homage to JRR. Of course, it's not really plagiarizing. I say that in jest. So then we've got... So either Sam is going to be held captive by Euron and give us POV insight into Euron, or Sam will escape, likely with the help of Alaris the Sphinx. So there's a couple more Sam chapters of either being captive or escaping, and then Sam's going to go somewhere. He's going to go to the Wall. He's going to go to King's Landing, maybe. He's got to go maybe go to Horn Hill. But Sam is going to have probably 6 to 8 chapters between all of that. And Damphair will have 1 or 2. So we're talking 7 to 9 chapters total from the Old Town plotline. We're also waiting for Victarion to get back. So depending on how far the Dany plotline goes, there could be something, else there. But I think that's about it. So then in the Vale, we have Sansa. She already has had one POV setting up a winged knight tournament. So we're going to need the actual tournament. I would say that's actually going to take 2 chapters because there'll be like a before and then after stuff as well as the tournament. There's a lot of politics going on and people might die. And there's going to be a Sweet Robin murder attempt that probably will be successful at some point. Harry the Heir might be assassinated or they might try to kill him, somebody. The Mad Mouse is running around there. At some point, Sansa will be revealed as a Stark. Sansa will continue to learn politics and be set up to turn the tables against Peter Baelish. And at the end of this plot line, Sansa either needs to go to King's Landing to be wrapped up in the Fagon plot line, or more likely be bounced to the north to interact with the Winterfell plot line. So definitely I would say 6 to 8 Sansa chapters to accomplish that. And that puts her in position to kind of join the story there at the end. Then we have Arya. Arya is another wild card. Her training can continue as long as necessary. We might only get a couple of chapters of Arya in Braavos. And then, guys, I could see George moving Arya off camera a little bit. Because what he could do is take advantage of her faceless man ability to have her show up anywhere in disguise as somebody and then, pull the mask off, kill somebody, do something dramatic, and it's Arya. Dun, dun, dun. So I definitely think there's a possibility that Arya could be one that we don't see her POV for a lot of the stuff she does. We could see her show up in other people's chapters. That would be fun to do. But even still, we will get some Arya chapters. So definitely 3 to 4 Arya chapters. Just to show her finishing up and then coming back to Westeros. And it might be an interesting way to depersonalize her. Because remember, George is making her no one. She's not totally no one. She still is Arya. But she's buried the Arya personality way down deep. So it might be a way for George to communicate that she's no one to not let us inside her POV. So we only see her from the outside as a killer. It would take advantage of the faceless man stuff. And like I said, we would be forced to wonder what's going on and how dehumanized she is. So that could be only a few. Also, George can make her take as long as he needs to get back to things. So that's not too much of a plot bugaboo there. But let me launch this one. Let me see if I read this tweet yet. Oh, yeah. So he has said that T-Rex Deletrius adds that, Arya is his wife's favorite character. And he said that writing Arya chapters is hard. So that could be one where that's something difficult for him to deal with. And yeah, like what if he had planned to do something really terrible where Arya is sent to kill somebody that we love, like Sansa or Sam or Jon or I don't know, something that's going to be really fucked up. I mean, George does like to do messed up stuff, so yeah. I mean, as far as the R plus L equals J, I'm been long convinced that RLJ is the case. I was convinced before the show depicted RLJ. I don't think the show would have gone differently than George, and I don't think George would change that. So that's a tree. I mean, if you want to bark up that tree, you can. I don't think that's a fruitful tree to bark up. I don't think RLJ has anything to do with anything. I think it's settled law, and I think revealing it's not going to be that big of a deal. So that's not really my bag. But I know there are still people holding out for some other counterintuitive alternate truth there. But this is This is not I'm not your Huckleberry. You're not going to find any talk about that here. I just really not interested in that stuff. So that brings me to the end of my notes here. So I will make a last call for questions or comments about the stream here. But yeah, I think we've covered the plot issues. We've covered, I guess, let me ask you this. What parts of the story do you think could be emotionally difficult for him to write? Obviously, you can see there's a lot of chapters. I didn't count them up, but you can get the idea of that, like, he probably is wrestling with a basic challenge of just fitting all of the action that he wants to have in this book. And there wasn't even a climax in here. Like, I guess Dany landing on Dragonstone could be a climax or something, but all of the stuff that we did is just to resolve the immediate plot issues that we know are sitting in front of people, right? The next couple of courses of action need to play out. This leaves us with Sansa maybe ready to go to Winterfell, maybe with the army of the Vale behind her. Winterfell is chilling with, Team Manderley and Rickon. Who God knows what's going on at the Wall. Jon could be up north or at the Wall. We don't know. Jaime and Brienne have resolved the Stoneheart plot and are ready to go join the fight against the others, maybe. King's Landing is under control of Fagon at this point, and Dany has not invaded yet. And that's basically where we got to. And we just filled up a whole book of chapters. So essentially, everyone in Westeros is ready for the long night to fall, and Dany is just getting on a boat in Meereen. That's what I can see. Because what's left between the long night falling and everything we just talked about in Westeros? Like, if the long night isn't going to fall until after Dany invades and deals with King's Landing and fights Fagon, what is everybody else doing that whole time? That's what I can't figure out. What's happening like, Jaime and Brienne are just ready to go. I mean, they could be shoveled off into any plot. Maybe Sansa gets wrapped up in the King's Landing plot instead of going north. But what is Jon doing? I guess Jon could be missing. But you see what I'm saying here. It's pretty tough to start making room for Dany to invade Westeros and fight with Fagon and start communicating with Jon about the others and then have the long night fall. There's kind of like, it's kind of tough. It seems like the long night will be ready to fall at the end of this book, but Dany is still going to be back in Meereen. So, not sure how it's going to happen. I have seen a few people in the stream recommend that George should just release 2 books. If it's too many chapters, just release 2 books at the same time, Winds of Winter 1 and 2. I also think that George could release Winds and then a collection of extra chapters that didn't fit as a supplementary material. Or he could just release more chapters piecemeal after the book. Or extra. Like, I think George could do any number of things. I even thought, why does George even need books? He could just start selling chapters in groups of 10. We'd fucking buy them, right? Like, why? Don't get caught up on the structure of the book, George. If your creativity has grown beyond the confines of where one book ends and begins, and you're just telling an ongoing tale, more like a manga or something, then just embrace it. Just sell 1 chapter at a time. Sell 10 chapters at a time. Somebody needs to suggest this to him. Like, if his blockage is really coming from trying to fit everything inside a book because a book can only have so many chapters, then fuck it, dude. Fuck it, man. Just sell chapters. Just release it. Release Winds, and then, like, do what Radiohead did. Radiohead came out with, which album was it? It was 2 albums ago. And they had 2 extra songs that didn't fit, and they just released them as a little EP after the album and said, hey, it kind of goes along with the album, but we didn't want to disrupt the track. You know, we had a nice 8-song album, and we didn't want to, let's see, it was King of Limbs, one of my favorite Radiohead albums. So the main album has 8 songs, and then they put out Super Collider and The Butcher afterward, a couple months, and we're just like, yeah, it's extra. So... And actually, if you sold chapters in smaller bunches, you'd end up making more money. Because think about it. When you buy a hardcover book, it's like $40. When you buy something on Audible, it's like $30. And you got the whole thing. If he gave us 10 chapters, how much would you pay for it? I mean, I'd pay $10 for it. Would you pay $1 per chapter, guys? So if you sold them in smaller chunks, you'd actually make more money. So there's definitely a way for him to work that out with his publisher. There's no structural issue with that. That's just a matter of being creative and thinking outside of the box. So, and it's right. It's not about money for George anyway. He's already very wealthy. So it's not a money issue. There's plenty of money. Yeah, new animals as leaders on the 25th. Yeah, that's dope. All right, I'd pay $10 per chapter. That's what I'm saying, dude. You could soak us for a lot of money. I wouldn't even care. I just want to see what's been written, man. So, yeah. I think I've said it all here, but this has been a really good session. I hope it has been cathartic for all of you guys watching. I will, again, say last call for questions. Antes Tube says, 2-month squisher. Cool idea. For me, it would be enjoyable to get the deeper comparison between Silmarillion and Fire and Blood. Yeah, so that's another thing, you know, of reading the Silmarillion, is it would give you that you would see what George is going for with his with Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire. So, yeah, Abraham King, you're absolutely right. George does, his ideas do change as he writes, and George does rewrite sometimes. Oh, I see what you're saying. He rewrites a lot of his past chapters based on ideas in future chapters, so he can't release them individually. Well, not individually, but once he's, you know, far out enough in front. Like right now, it seems like he could give us the first 10 of Wins, which is handling the battles. So there is a certain point at which he could get far enough out ahead to start releasing. But I agree, he couldn't just release one chapter as he writes them. No, that would not work for him. But he could do something. Like I said, at the very least, release Wins and then add the extra chapters that didn't fit just as a freebie extra. So that's not hard. James Harden will never win a championship in Philadelphia or anywhere else. He doesn't have the heart of a champion. He's proved that over and over. He shrinks from every big game. He sabotaged his team twice in a row, which is not something a champion does. And if you've noticed, he's not even the player he was 4 years ago. He can't even beat people off the dribble. James Harden is a net negative. And if the Sixers re-sign him to a $50 million per year contract, they will be sorry. And Joel Embiid, sadly, will never win a championship with James Harden. That is my basketball take for the day. Yes. Sorry to bring the truth. But, you know, T-Wow will get here before Harden wins the championship. Thank you, Downtown Clowney. Thank you. I mean, I don't know how long you need to watch sports to realize that people like James Harden don't win championships. They don't. Man, that could age poorly. Nah, bring it on. Here, I'll give you more that could age poorly. I'd rather have, going forward, listen to what I'm saying here, as an asset, I would rather have Jordan Poole than James Harden. I would rather pay Jordan Poole $25 million a year for the next 5 years than to pay James Harden, who's already over the hill and doesn't care about staying in shape, 50 plus for the next 5 years. That would be crazy. So I'm not saying that Poole is better than Harden right now, but going forward, I would rather have Jordan Poole or a number of other people than James Harden. So there. Take that. Jordan Poole's going to go for 30 tonight. I'd rather have Jane Poole than James Harden. Yes. And I'm sorry for those of you who don't know basketball and have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm very sorry. We're at the end of the stream. If you have any serious questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm about to shut this down, clearly. So let me just check on my PayPals. I think I did get one here. This is your chance. You want me to, let me know. I'll comment on whatever you want right now. There's a small window. And then I got to go watch the Warriors game and take Goose out. Thank you, everyone who sent in PayPals, by the way. Natasha with a generous PayPal says, praise Garth. I will summon the Garth fan tomorrow. Steven says, oh, no, that's the one I read earlier that almost brought me to tears. I won't read that again. Thank you, though. LML covers the NCAA tournament. No sports. No, I'm not doing that. Jordan Peele over James Harden. I'd rather have Will Ferrell's character from the basketball movie he did. He showed up the other day. Anyways, now you see what's going on here, guys. And just to double back, I've come pretty hard on George. We've judged him, I think, candidly and honestly. But I just do want to emphasize how much I respect and admire George. You guys know that. I don't feel like I need to say that over and over. That's all I do on this channel is praise his writing technique to the skies. He is a great writer. The thing here that gets me the most is that if George is unable to finish his story, the greatness of the mythology and the symbolism in the writing will probably never go recognized as it should, because he will just be remembered as a guy who couldn't finish his story. And that to me is just really sad. I hope that doesn't happen. But as long as I'm talking about A Song of Ice and Fire, I will continue to bring out all of the great layers of it and have fun with it. So again, what I'm looking for in the comments, guys, if you're watching this after the fact or right now, let me know what you want me to do, how you want me to cover the story. I'm here every Sunday, so let me know what you want me to do. I'm definitely doing the mythology channel. Check out Mythic Concepts, but we have too much fun here on Starry Wisdom Sunday. I would never shut down Starry Wisdom Sunday. So let me know how you guys want me to cover Song of Ice and Fire in the comments. And I think reading the Silmarillion is getting a lot of feedback. So I'm excited to do that. I would also like to read, like I said, Through the Fire and Blood stuff sometime before House of the Dragon. That seems like a no-brainer. So cheers, guys. I love you very much. You all are wonderful. Thank you for enabling me to do this for a living. And I will see you next Sunday. And if you haven't watched the Kali video, most of you guys have not, go over to Mythic Concepts. There's a 35-minute produced LML video there. I could have put it on this channel, but I put it on the new channel. So do me a favor, go over to Mythic Concepts, watch the Kali video. And good Lord, if you're a patron and you pay for me to do this, this is part of your content. So please go over to Mythic Concepts, check out the Kali video. I'm busily writing more scripts about Harappan seals and Rappan seals and all that stuff. So I will see you next Sunday. And Mythic Concepts, just look it up. It's easy to find. I'll see you next time.